to expect this from our state. So I would not look to increase any taxes in the state right now, because I think that we can bring some innovative solutions to these areas. In particular, I'm a big champion of this idea of restorative justice, which I hope we'll have some time at the end of the night to talk about with you one-on-one. And also looking to increase the competition between schools. We've seen parents pulling their children out of our public school system. And public school is really an institution that we should be supporting and strengthening. And it hurts me looking to be raising children in a state where the quality of education is diminishing.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I do not support tax increases. As a matter of fact, in my time in Dover since 2008, there have only been revenue enhancement increases, which some refer to as user fees or document fees. The budget changes in the last 5 years were in fiscal year 2010, we actually went down 8.1%. In fiscal 2011, we increased 6.9, 12 was 6.2, 13 was 2.2, 14 was 3.6, and in 2015 we were projecting that a change of 2.4%. So it's roughly a change each year of 2.5%, which I think is fairly compatible with the federal increases, and I believe firmly that we get our bang for our buck. As I said earlier in my opening remarks, I do firmly believe in our educational school system here in the state of Delaware. I have 3 daughters that are very actively and gainfully employed in that. I'd also like to point out that over the last several years, the governor had proposed each year in his opening remarks or opening round remarks that there would be a decrease in transportation fees for private schools, which fortunately each year we were able to restore that despite the governor's calls initially. And I will tell you that I get quite a few responses, or I should say that I received quite a few emails in regard to that particular piece of our budget, and I'm very pleased and proud to say that we're able to deliver. One thing that I did want to mention earlier, I'd forgotten in my opening remarks, is that I am a member of the Delaware Army National Guard, have been for 33 years, and I proudly served in Iraq in 2005. I don't know how that directly relates to the tax increases, but I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jerry. Next question. Would you support making all transportation-related revenue that the state receives usable only on transportation-related projects?
Yes, I would. The reason for that is I'm not quite sure what the statistic was before, but I do know that we have had 13 tax increases in the last 5 years. So looking at that, right, we've raised all this revenue. You've seen a 23% increase in state spending. Some of that is federal money, but our roads and bridges are in disrepair. That's a fundamental function of state government. That's not something that's extracurricular that we're trying to bring on. It's not a social issue. It's the basic function that state government is supposed to provide for us. State revenue, when you're looking at from the Transportation Trust Fund, has been robbed before in order to balance our budget. Now, like I said, when you see a continual increase in spending over the years, and then you're seeing them take money, that's what a budget's for. It's there to put in place money that we use for certain measures. I don't agree that we should be able to take money from the Transportation Trust Fund in order to balance some of our numbers in the general fund. That's something dangerous. That's something that didn't always exist. Actually, I believe Republicans have changed it, if I'm not mistaken, but it should be changed back. Those are dollars that are desperately needed right now. We're expected to have another bad winter, and we just can't afford to be raising taxes in an economy like it is, that they say, you know, it's recovering. Families are struggling. I see it firsthand. So I would not support the ability for them to take funds out of money that is otherwise used for transportation, repair and infrastructure, repairing other infrastructure.
Yeah, I too am opposed to the increase of fees and or taxes, particularly as they directly relate to the DelDOT's trust fund. Each year we have, over the past, in my time at least 8 years, We have pillaged that particular fund. It reminds me of my days as a Wilmington City Councilman when each year we would pass a budget and then immediately amend it to use the stormwater fees.
No, you're good, yeah.
Keep going.
The fees for stormwater management for operating costs. And again, this is very similar to that, and we certainly don't appreciate the fact that, is this,
No, keep going.
am I just lucky about one minute here? In any event, I am opposed to the increase in that particular area, and have clearly demonstrated in my time in Dover that we need to separate our operational cost from the strategic fund.
Next question. Recently, Delaware's elected leaders decided to ignore the threat of rising tides in the Delaware City area by transferring publicly owned undeveloped land in a floodplain to a development corporation for private development. What's your position on this potentially conflicting public policy issue?
So, when you're looking at building homes from a private company in a flood zone, to me, first of all, that's not a major issue in the 4th District. I think Representative Brady would be able to elaborate that a little bit more on it, because he served the district for 8 years. However, that affects more districts to the east side of where the 4th is. So that's not something that we deal with as much in the 4th District. However, going back to the question, I mean, the litmus test I always use is, individual responsibility, really. I mean, if you're building a home in a flood zone, it's not really up to other taxpayers to subsidize any damages that are as a result of floods in that area. That's really my response to that. I mean, I don't see it as being a large issue in the 4th District.
Thank you. Yes, it is not a particularly large issue in the 4th District, but I will point out that anywhere in the state of Delaware is no more than 8.2 miles from from high tide. And the reason I stress that point is that although it may not be imperative right now to buy a home or to purchase a property in the 4th District, there are very significant problems, residual problems relating to that statewide. One of the biggest problems that we do have in the 4th District is stormwater management because of the topography, particularly sections of the 4th District that are along the old industrial beds like the Brandywine and the Christina River, and of course the Red Clay Creek. There is not a year that goes by that we don't have a torrential and devastating event, storm event, that doesn't impact those areas that are not necessarily in the floodplain, but are certainly impacted by ravaging stormwater and improper stormwater maintenance. That is one of the things that I would say we spend most of, particularly the CTF, Community Transportation Fund, I'm sorry, CTF is the Community Transportation Fund, is to do just that, is to resolve, instead of paving roads, I wind up having to replace storm sewers and drainage ditches throughout the entire district. So although we're not necessarily on the floodplain, we are definitely impacted by our changing climate, whether it be through man-made devastation or not. It definitely has an impact.
Next question, probably the last. On DelDOT's work program, is nearly $500 million investment in a 4-lane toll road from 301 at the Maryland line to SR1 at the Roth Bridge. That is projected to serve 5,200 vehicles a day total, not per lane. There are alternatives to that. What's your position on the propriety of spending $500 million for a toll road for 5,200 vehicles a day?
Again, that's outside the board, but that is an issue that I will be dealing with in the state legislature. I think that this is systemic of some other issues that, like I mentioned before, have been going on in the state, and that is really inefficiencies at the fiscal spending that's going on with our budget. You know, I think it was, what was it, this last presidential year, that famous quote they kept on hammering into our heads, that bridge to nowhere. I mean, this is kind of, this is to me characteristic of what's going on at the state level. We're spending dollars where we're not getting a strong return on them. I think more so though, because that is out of the district, I would also like to touch on this idea of repairing roads and bridges in the state. I mean, we're spending so much revenue in other areas that, like I said, a basic function of what we're supposed to be doing, making our dollars go further, that's something that we're not achieving. And so as a result, my opinion on it, what I would do is I would oppose something that you're spending such a large amount of money and getting such a small return on it. It's very inefficient, it's not fiscally responsible, and it just perpetuates the budget issue that we've been having in the state since 2009, really, since when we started to recover from the recession.
In February of this past year, the Governor Markell and Secretary Blatt from DelDOT held a press conference in Dover announcing his proposal to increase our gas tax, and this very specifically, the increase was going to be appropriated towards improving our infrastructure, yet more specifically our highways. And at that particular press conference, I asked the question, why have we abandoned the efforts to look for alternative measures and alternative transportation modes here in the state of Delaware, particularly a north and south rail from the population center here in Newcastle County to a ever-growing population center in Sussex County, particularly on the eastern shore. And unfortunately, the governor didn't have a quick response for that. This was the increase was going to be specifically to increase, to create jobs, yet more importantly, improve our infrastructure. Again, I along with Jeff Wilson, who's a very active member of our community, who's with Bike Delaware, he and I have had many long conversations about not just necessarily bicycling, but other forms of transportation that are alternatives to the concrete slabs that we keep paving and building, particularly in the Route 195 area. When that project was completed, although it alleviated a very significant problem we've had for many, many years in northern Delaware, yet I think it has helped us, or it has made us abandon the effort to look into alternatives to specifically vehicular traffic. I've been a long proponent of a rail system between Wilmington and Newark, and we're still in the planning stages. Thank you.
We've reached 20 minutes.
Give these three.
You got 3 minutes each
For closing statement.
2 would be better.
2 minutes? That's plenty of time. I've been finishing on the time. So, again, touching on the reason why I'm running, we've really faced a lot of fiscal issues in the state, and that's not the only part of the problem we're facing. But, you know, in particular, like I said, in the last 5 years, I was born and raised in Delaware, and I remember when you could work for one of the major corporations. You know, my father did it at AstraZeneca for 35 years. You could retire from there with a pension, a slap on the back, and a gold watch. That doesn't exist anymore. If you're looking at Delaware labor statistics, we're working more hours, the middle class, I should say, is working more hours for less pay and for less benefits. You've seen a 14% decrease in salaries since 2009. That's 5 years our salaries have been decreasing. Education results, we've been spending 67% more. Results have remained flat. Wilmington, I love Wilmington, and we're going to raise our children there, but Wilmington is suffering from a really bad crime problem right now. And it's not something that's going to go away. It's something that's going to take innovative reforms, innovative ideas. We need some fresh blood, some new ideas, and that's what I'm going to be bringing to the office. You know, if you look at anything over time, it's supposed to be cheaper and it's supposed to get better. Education has gone opposite. Public justice has gone the opposite way, and people are starting to really kind of wake up and consider alternate ideas, and that's what I'm looking to do. And I encourage everybody to stick around afterwards. I would love, issues are my favorite thing to talk about, so I'd love to stick around with you and have some conversation about what you think. But if there is anybody in this room from the 4th, I hope I can count on your support. We do not need another 13 tax increases that have been voted for. They just bailed out the casino. My opponent didn't vote against that. There's a lot of things going on that I think need to change. But more importantly, we just need to start to have a really long-term outlook on how things are done in this state. And that's something I'll be bringing to the office. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recap again that I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Wilmington. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and all of us live within the city of Wilmington's boundaries. A fact that I'm very proud of, but it's also something that, as you can imagine, creates a little bit of consternation when, as Robert indicated, your crime rate just continues to increase. I live with my 4 children on Shellcross Avenue in the heart of 40 acres. I've indicated already that my 3 daughters are in the educational system. My son's a freshman in college, or excuse me, at Salesianum and college next. And my wife and I both work, so we know very, very well, day to day, day in and day out, the struggles and the burdens that are placed on us by not just our economy, but the other social problems that we're experiencing. I will point out one thing about the increase for, the passage of the Relief Act for the casinos. I was a long-standing young man. For many, many years, I worked at the backstretch of Brandywine Racetrack delivering horse feed, and I remember all too well the Delaware Horsemen's Relief Act, which was passed in 1992, which interestingly enough was not signed by Governor Carper because he was opposed to it at the time. But in any event, we have relied on that particular source of revenue now for well over 30 years, and I stand corrected, 20 years. And enough is enough. And the business plan, the business model that have been operating at these particular facilities, the racetrack, deviates very drastically from the initial intent of the Horsemen's agri-equine model, Relief Act. So I am deeply concerned about our reliance on the revenue from those gaming facilities, and look forward to pursuing other alternative ways to get back to some more conventional and traditional ways of balancing our budget with fair taxes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Do we have any candidates from the 9th district? Ninth district. Kevin Hensley, Douglas Campbell.
I'm Doug. What's that?
Candidates from the 21st district. 21st district. Mike Ramone.
He was here. Let me go grab him.